Holy crap, we're live again. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you let me know, give me a thumbs up in the live chat if you guys can hear me okay? And before I get started, I wanted to do my compliance stuff first. So whatever I say in this video is not financial advice or recommendation for you to do anything. It's just general information for entertainment purposes. Cool? And today, there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. And there's been a lot of conversation about Brainchip CEO exiting. I just wanted to share some commentary around that, and then I'll answer some of the questions as well. And there is some new updates around OpenPay as well, but there's not that much to talk about. So I'll briefly mention it, and then there's plenty of questions that I'll need to get through from last week. So I'll go for about 45 minutes and we'll see how we go, okay? So it's by now you would have heard that Brainchip's CEO have now exited, and I'm not going to speculate whether whatever happened between that relationship. I just wanted to look at some of the facts, and then make some commentary around that. But the word terminator is a little harsh, I have to say. So if we look at the announcement that was released yesterday, so the previous CEO will actually be part-timing in Brainchip, so he's not completely exiting the business. It seems like he has decided to step down to pursue other interests. But I just wonder why they didn't just say, the Brainchip CEO decided to step down. Why did it have to be kind of so harsh language? Now, during this period where he goes part-time, he'll be paid about 100,000 in monthly or equal monthly installments over 12 months. And then the severance package will be approximately 300 grand in US. That's pretty standard. And when the CEO leaves, there are severance packages. So I'm not too surprised by that. Most people have talked about the ordinary shares, but not the options. So I want to talk about the ordinary shares first, and I'll talk about the options, right? So he's leaving with approximately 11 million shares. And 11 million shares at today's price is about 6.5 million, because today's price is about 56 cents. So if you just do 11 million times by 0.56, approximately 6.5 million, right? But at the same time, it's worthwhile mentioning that there are a lot of options that are fully vested and expiring. So he will have the opportunity to exercise them. And if he doesn't exercise them, then he'll probably lose those options. So again, I'm not going to speculate what he is or isn't going to do. But it's really interesting to know that there are a lot of options that he can exercise at 22.5 cents. So for some of you who are unfamiliar with options, basically how it works is that you have the right to purchase or sell a share. Now, for the right to buy a share, that's what you call a call option. A put option is the right to sell a share, right? So he has the right to purchase these shares at 22.5 cents. And there are a lot of them. So 23 million, 15 million, 6 million. There are some that are still waiting to be vested. And yeah, so he has a lot of shares. And I wonder if they have an agreement where he won't be able to sell those shares for a period of time to not cause any fluctuations, but he can still exercise those options. So we'll see. I don't want to speculate too much here. But it is worthwhile noting that he is staying on in the company, helping co-founder Peter, to get through this period, find a new CEO, but he will be paid quite well, in my opinion, and he still has a lot of shares, okay? What's really interesting is that when it was announced that he was leaving yesterday, the share price went for a rally today. And to me, it seems more like almost positive news that people were excited that there is going to be new leadership for this business. And for me, I think at the current stage where they're at, it will be nice. And I'll make a little bit more commentary around the CEO in just a second. So let me keep going. And I made some notes as well. So just give me a second. Now, there's been a lot of speculation when the CEO announced that he was leaving. And there was speculation around the CEO came out of retirement. So when he left, out of the blue, it's not that big of a surprise. And then at the same time, there was some speculation around the average tenure for CEO is about 5 years. So his 5 years is up. So there is that as well. So I want to address some of that commentary because I feel like it's worth having a little bit of input there, right? So I want to talk about the 5-year average CEO tenure first, because what's really interesting to me is that, yes, if you look at a standard deviation curve, in the middle, it would be on average, the tenure will be about 5 years, which is fair. But I think if we do a thought exercise and you look at some of the best CEOs possible across the world in the most recognized brands, the tenure for these CEOs is not going to be like average 5 years. It's going to be way longer than that. And so on that front, I don't really agree that the average tenure for a CEO is about 5 years and people get bored and they exit. For me personally, I think that the CEO's role is to realize a vision for the company. And the vision of a company, it's likely going to take 5 years. And especially with something so difficult with semiconductors, which has it's capital intensive. It takes time. It just takes time to sell into companies. So so for me, when we talk about average CEO tenure, I don't agree that just because the average CEO tenure is about 5 years, therefore that's the reason that the former CEO for Brainchip is leaving. Because I believe that a great CEO, an extraordinary CEO, will take longer. It's going to stay longer than 5 years, right? There are plenty of reasons why why CEOs leave. Like, for example, some long-standing CEOs will get tired eventually and they want to take some rest. Jeff Bezos is a very good example of that. There's some ethical reasons. So if you look at some of the banks who changed CEOs, those are good examples as well. Poor performance, that's a very common example to basically like just fire CEOs and replace it with new ones. So frankly, in my perspective, I'm more of a believer that I would like to see a way longer tenure CEO, right? Let me go back to that. So as I was digging, so I dug very deep for all of Brainchip's announcements back to when they first did their reverse merger, just to see whether the speculation around the CEO came out of retirement is true, so on and so forth, because I don't really believe anything that I read on the internet nowadays. And interesting enough, I did find a podcast interview that was done in 2018 between the former CEO and within a podcast to Pete. And then there was a whole story around Pete convincing him to get started. But if you dig a little deeper, there was a couple announcements around that as well, where the co-founder Pete actually recruited they hired a recruitment firm to help him hire. And to me, I am not pro recruitment agencies when it comes to CEOs. And I think when you get into the workforce and what you realize is that when you own a team and when you are looking after a team and when you need to hire, what you find is that a lot of the great talent will never be available. They are not available ever, because if they're good, someone will always catch them first. So then it becomes your job to talk to them, build that relationship, get to know them, and it'll take months or years to eventually convince them to come over to help you. And for me, I think that's more of a co-founder CEO's job to go hunt for talent. I don't really think that's a recruiter's job, especially for CEO. And I think that especially for a semiconductor company, I am a big believer for an engineering-led CEO, because if you look at some of the best CEOs for semiconductors, like for example Intel and AMD, Intel's best CEO, in my opinion, and it's very arguable, Andy Grove is kind of my hero. Like he has a book. If you're in a manager position right now, there's a book that most managers read and they call High Output Management. That's a classic, right? And Andy Grove carried Intel, from that early era. And then, when a non-engineering led CEO came to the top, things just changed, right? And another really good example is Dr. Lisa Su from AMD. She was promoted internally, and she's the era of engineering led at the helm. And in saying that, so going back to the whole CEO conversation, I am not pro recruitment agencies. I would much prefer to see co-founder Peter to go out and hunt. And I would love to see, honestly, like an engineering led at the helm. But that's that's a personal opinion. At the same time, it doesn't change my opinion about Brainchip that they haven't been able to sell anything. I want to see them, if they're valued almost at $1 billion, they have to be able to sell something. Like it's important to generate revenue, not even earnings, just revenue, right? So I think it's really important to have that. And this whole saga doesn't change my opinion of that. It would be really nice to get some new blood and have a stronger leadership that will take them from billion to maybe 10 billion. Who knows? I'm making numbers up here. Into the future, and I think it's going to take longer than 5 years to do that. So someone a lot more committed will be amazing, because the team inside Brainchip is starting to be pretty convincing. You have a couple of Intel people. It's looking pretty good, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to sell, because if you can't sell, you're not making revenue. That's not a sustainable business, right? That becomes more of a charity and research project. So I think that's all I wanted to say about the whole CEO situation. I'm indifferent. Him leaving, and I think the market has taken that more as a positive note, for a new direction. I think that's pretty cool. I wasn't very happy about, when I did my video on Brainchip a while back, and you can search on my channel for the Brainchip video. They did acquire SpikeNet back in 2016, and they were doing really well back then. They were generating revenue. There was contracts with I think one of the airports in Europe, and also with some of the casinos as well. So things were going really well. It's just I wish they continue on that road a little bit more, right? So that's all I have to say when it comes to the CEO front. I'm going to answer some of the questions in just a second. There are plenty of questions at the moment. And then the OpenPay question. So there was some commentary around OpenPay becoming the first buy now, pay later for elective surgery. I think when it comes to growth for buy now, pay later companies, the velocity of lending that money out, getting that back, and then lending it out again is important, right? The faster you can do that, to lend it out and then make money, and then lend it out again, that's really important. And elective surgeries, these are quite expensive, right? Removing kidney stones and stuff like that. They're pretty expensive. So these are pretty big lending amounts. So for me, I need to see a little bit more, because even though that sounds good, I wonder how effective, I wonder what the take rate is for people actually using buy now, pay later. Within my Patreon, people have talked a lot about potentially using that instead of having private health insurance. And I think that's a very valid point. But beyond that, I want to see a little bit more of that. So that's really all I have to say when it comes to buy now, pay later, and also the Brainchip CEO. There's quite a bit of questions, so I'm going to try and answer some of the questions. So if you have more questions, just leave it in the chat box. So ThinkHelp said, I don't know about the concept of great CEO being someone who's already occupying a seat somewhere else, but sometimes they can bring great people with them. Yes, I agree. I think where I was trying to get at with that comment is for great, where I'm trying to get at with that point is that great talent sometimes is just not available. You have to go find them, hunt them, and it's hard. And I think where I'm getting to with that point is that recruitment agencies, they will get the job done, but it might not be the best candidate for you, right? I'm not saying they don't have a role, when it comes to the value chain for talent, but I am just saying that I would love to see co-founder Peter go out and hunt for talent, and preferably engineering-led at the helm. That would be amazing to see, right? So that's my thoughts on that. Did you see the Brainchip and Medical successfully detect code? No, I did not see that. And that's news to me. Thank you. Michael's a good friend and starting his own channel as well. So please go check out his channel. He's an inspiration. Like he is one of the rare few who is kind of in his early 30s. Well, almost 30s, and he's already at that kind of financial independence level, and for me that's a huge inspiration, right? So please check out Michael's channel. He's amazing designer. He's worked for some of the best startups in Australia. Amazing person. BBUS and DTC, I don't own BBUS. I think that's a ETF for bears, right? It's almost like a hedge against S&P 500. So I don't own both. And let me get through some of the previous questions. So there was a couple of questions in my previous live chat that people left that I want to put my thoughts down. When is that enough for me? And when will I consider selling and move on to new pastures? For me, my first milestone is financial independence. So there's not exactly a point of enough, but it's more I'm building my system to ultimately realize my own vision. My vision for myself is still a little bit blurry, so I don't have a good answer to that. But when it comes to considering selling, I will only sell some of my positions if I don't believe them anymore, or things have changed and they're no longer part of my original thesis. Like Slack will be a really good example. When I first wrote my thesis on Slack and when I first invested, I think it was October last year, I bought it at, I think, $24. And then when Salesforce announced that they were going to acquire Slack, the share price almost doubled. My thesis changed completely because they're no longer the same company. And that's when I offloaded, because I had to rewrite my thesis on Slack with taking into account Salesforce, right? There was a question around how do I move into digital marketing? I might actually make next week's live stream on that because I did transition my career from one of the big 4 consulting firms into marketing, which is like super strange. Let me see what other comments are there. One sentence on IPO coming Monday. Actually summarized my thoughts in the Airtasker IPO video already. I'm more pro vertical marketplaces, not horizontal marketplaces. And I think this is an environment where low and rising interest rates will hurt the valuation of growth companies. So they might pop, on Monday. But yeah, it's tough. So I'm going to watch that story a little bit closely. What are your views on Zip given the fluctuation we're seeing recently? We talk about Zip. So ever since my previous live stream, there's been a lot of conversation around, what should I do with Zip, so on and so forth. It's having a big correction. Well, what I've always said in my Patreon is that, for example, my HIMS position corrected quite big, right? But I didn't panic sell. Like it was not a concern for me. And so for me, similarly for Zip, for the people who are invested in Zip, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is your foundational thesis on Zip? Because if you have a very solid foundation and you understand, their plan, how they plan to grow into the future and expand, these corrections, it's kind of like a distraction, right? And for me, for a lot of my positions, I have a lot of conviction. So when it corrects, like I'm getting ready to add to it. I don't think about, I have lost a lot of money and therefore I should, crystallize some of my losses, if you will. So it's very different. Personally, that's very different for me. So I'm more concentrated around high conviction positions. So that's important to me. Hey, David, I own both BRN and OPY. What is the long run? The price will skyrocket. I've actually told quite a bit about Brainchip in my previous video about Brainchip. So search for that video in my channel. And for me, I think Brainchip has quite a big hurdle to cross where they need to be able to sell. Okay, I don't feel like I've stressed enough about that. Like for a business who are generating little revenue, eventually you have to learn how to sell or sell something, right? Because there's no sustainable business model for not selling, because that becomes a research project. In terms of price, that's for you to determine, because ultimately the share price is kind of random in the short term, because you've all heard of that saying that in the short term, the stock market is like a popularity contest, and in the long term is like a weighing machine. So you have to think about, okay, how are they going to monetize their Keto chips? Is there even who might they be able to sell to, right? They talk about autonomous driving, and you think about, okay, all of the autonomous players in the market, like for example, NVIDIA, Mobileye from Intel, You have basically Tesla making their own chips. NIO is using mobile, so that would they be even able to sell to some of these companies, right? So you have to determine your own thesis on what that share price might be in the future. I don't own any buy now, pay later, so it's hard for me to comment what those prices might be. I think some people are very bullish on buy now, pay later. And for me, in my Patreon, I talked a lot about where I think with buy now, pay later is a great case study to learn from. But what I was really, really scared of is that buy now, pay later is very dependent on, well, especially Zip and Afterpay, it's very dependent on the checkout infrastructure, because that's where they acquire a majority of their customers. But Zip obviously have changed that because they have their virtual cards and so on and so forth. They found new ways to acquire customers, which makes me feel a lot more comfortable. So when it comes to Brainchip and OpenPay, I can't say too much in terms of what their future might be, but you might have a better idea because, I can't press this. Okay. What do you think about the Commonwealth Bank entering into the buy now, pay later? So what's really interesting about CBA making this move is that they already had a stake in Kalana, and I thought that was their move into buy now, pay later. But it turns out that they want to create their own. I guess maybe they don't trust that their stake, and maybe they just want to build their own technology on that. So I think CBA can give Afterpay a run for their money in Australia, but beyond that, Afterpay is they are absolutely destroying it in the US. I don't think they would have a chance in countries outside of Australia, but they definitely have a really good chance in Australia just because it's CBA, and I would love to see whether they are building that buy now, pay later within their own brand, or they're spinning out an alternate brand. It's probably going to be within the CBA brand. It's probably expecting too much if they're trying to build their own brand on that. But if there's one thing that CBA do really well, is that their digital expertise, their user experience is amazing. I actually think that Westpac is catching up, which is very surprising for me to even say that. But CBA have nailed the digital experience every time, which is crazy. So William have asked, do you think the correction is over? Do you have much cash in the sidelines? So from our previous live stream, no, I don't think the correction is over. I do have cash on the sidelines in case something was to happen again. I'm ready. So I think the most important thing that I didn't really get to mention last live stream is that, although we're investing, so on and so forth, it's really important to focus on building your income streams. And I think that, while I invest, and I'll talk to you guys a lot about my own investing journey, I spend a lot of time building my income streams just so that I'm ready for these opportunities, right? So for me, I am a big believer that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So while the opportunity is coming to me, I'm constantly preparing. Cool. Value stocks or tech stocks going to outperform? That's a tough question. It depends on what country. I think what I'll say, shout out to Michael, by the way. Like, if you guys haven't watched Michael's content, please go check out Michael's channel as well. He does a lot of real estate content. It's been amazing he's an OG supporter as well. So shout out to him for that. So to answer this question, I think in the low and rising interest environment, tech stocks, especially the high flying stuff, will get a pretty big correction or re-rating, whatever fund managers call them. But in saying that, not all tech stocks are overvalued. I think it's very important to make that distinction, just because I think some people just like to do a blanket statement and say the entire market is overvalued. I just don't think that is the case. I think that some tech stocks have an incredible amount of value. And if you think about it, okay, so just because we're heading back to work, do you think people will pull out of AWS? I doubt that will be the case, right? That's something that there's no way that just because people are going back to work, they will pull out of AWS or spend less money on AWS. I just don't think that is the case, right? And then with value stocks, we have to think a little bit more with a little bit more precision, because with value stocks, okay, which one is going to be a short-term play? And I'm not a short-term play kind of guy, right? So so with any value stocks, it's, even though it sounds good and there is rebounding, so on and so forth, I'm very scared of falling into the trap, and rotating some of my money into value stocks without digging extensively that the value stock is actually going to be a growth stock in the future. Because I'm a long-term investor, so I don't really think of it as, I don't rotate my money just like into different places very quickly. So that's not my that's not my cup of tea. What are my thoughts on the semiconductor industry? I was investing in AMD for a very long time, and we're moving into this era of computer on cars, like Internet of Things. I don't think I need to comment too much about the semiconductor industry. It's a growing industry, but there's a short supply at the moment. But in saying that, I am pro Dr. Lisa Su from AMD. I am a big supporter, and I think that's all I have to say. Hi, David. Do you imagine that you will be looking at mining stocks and hemp CBD at any stage, or they outside of your area of focus? Mining stocks will be mostly graphite. Battery-related stuff will be more kind of within my area of focus. Hemp and CBD potentially in the future, because I know that it's a hot area, and when everyone's talking about it, I freak out a little bit. Like, it's too much attention, and I don't like that. So I like to kind of take a step back and go easy, and then when things quiet down a little bit, I might take a look. But it's not. I'm more interested, like it. So that kind of reminds me of something. I'm more interested in vertical farming. Like, for example, when we do agriculture, when we talk about agriculture stuff, it's there's a lot of pesticides you have to, there's a lot of variables that you have to maintain. Farmer's job is actually really hard. So imagine you have a vertical farm, like a warehouse, where you can control the temperature, the air, the moisture level, and the nutrients and soil. Agriculture will be like revolutionized. I think I'm more interested in that area. So let me see. What value stocks would you be looking into as great for future? I recently added Amazon in my latest video. Some people say that is a tech stock. I almost think of it as a value stock. And to be honest, majority of my ETFs, my foundational layer is very much built on Australian ETFs. So I consider those as value stocks, but I don't go out of my way to pick or allocate capital to specific value stocks. So that's not my thing. How long into the future do you think lithium-ion batteries will maintain before better tech arrives? Will demand eventually outweigh supply in the next few decades? To answer the last part first, yeah, very likely that demand will eventually outweigh supply, and that's why there is a big conversation around, people needing to lock in supply now, because they know that in the future they will probably, not have enough supply, and then they have to deal with fluctuating commodity prices. So that's why you're seeing like a lot of car companies like forking out big bucks to lock in contracts now. In terms of lithium-ion batteries, it took them ages to get to this point, a long time, when the unit economics actually makes sense. So I do not believe that in the next decade, something else will completely overtake lithium-ion batteries. No matter, I know there are like better tech out there where people are talking about solid state and so on and so forth. I think Jordan from the Limiting Factor, I get a chance to talk to him a lot about this, where yes, it sounds good on paper, but how does that scale? At what cost? Where are you going to source the materials from? Is the supply chain ready? There are so many questions. So I think lithium-ion batteries is definitely the most safest bet to be. Yeah, it's going to be here for a long, long time. Different battery chemistries will change. For example, Tesla have been saying that they want to use more iron phosphate. And then different countries, they'll use different chemistries, as well as different applications as well. So, higher nickel chemistry, you might go with trucks. So just to answer your question, I think lithium-ion batteries have a very good shelf life over the next decade. And yes, demand will outweigh supply in the next few decades. ASX Investor, shout out to ASX Investor. That dude does not sleep. Yeah, that's all I have to say. That dude does not sleep. Yeah, shout out to him for that. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Anthony has said, hi, David, for the sideline money, do you leave them in the bank or elsewhere? I just don't like cash in the bank. I leave them in places where I can purchase immediately. So sounds bad, but I save approximately 60 to 70% of my paycheck, and I don't even see that money. I just route it to my brokerage account just so that I don't accidentally go buy some Jordans. I try to keep it real to myself because I know I'm impulsive. I know I'm stupid. So I try and leave it in places where if I need to buy something, I'm ready to go. So that's generally either in my stake account or in my CMC account. Take this as a consultation fee. Shout out to Michael for that. Red Hot on the compliance. If you guys have more questions, just leave it in the live chat section. I have a few other questions I want to get through. So from my previous live stream, people asked me, how am I going with my technical analysis? For me, technical analysis, I'm a fundamentals guy, so technical analysis is quite new to me. I think I'm focusing on just drawing support lines, and I would message people and show them the charts I'm drawing and the insights I'm getting just to see whether I'm on the right track. So I think I'm doing pretty well, but I'm not using technical analysis to make purchasing decisions. I am just using technical analysis to make observations around the market psychology. Like, where are people at when it comes to a particular security, right? Is the momentum too hot, too cold, etc.? I just want to get a gauge on what's happening in the markets, right? So I would say I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting used to seeing all the different bars and the volume and drawing support lines. So pretty happy with my progress at the moment. But I'm probably not going to get into like really technical stuff like drawing Fibonacci lines and stuff like that. I think it's going to take me a little while to get to that point. Thoughts on the Spaceship investing app? I actually made a video on this, so feel free to check out that video. Just go to my channel and just search for Spaceship. How do you identify bottom and top? You don't. I don't, just because I lack the resources to. I don't have analysts supporting me around me, and for me to yell at them to help me kind of identify bottom and top. I think that's a very difficult challenge, and you need a lot of resources for that. And as a retail investor, I don't do that. And because I have a long time horizon, I don't need to do that as much. So yeah, I don't do that. There's quite a few comments as well. Hi, David. What do you think of cybersecurity stocks? Do you have any you're keeping an eye on? Yes, I do. Similar to my previous live stream, I talked a lot about cybersec, and a main reason for that is I have a good friend who works in CrowdStrike, and I'm keeping an eye on 3 at the moment. Well, mostly 2, to be honest. It's CrowdStrike and Zscaler, but they're so richly valued for me personally at the moment. It's just I want to, but I can't. Yeah. So and similar to what I said last week, I think with cybersecurity, if enterprises have not thought about it after all of the SolarWinds saga and Microsoft supposedly being, breached by a rogue organization somewhere in Asia, I think people would definitely be thinking about that at this point. They'll 100% be thinking about it at this point. I have 2-factor on everything. Like, I don't trust anyone. Do I? Of course. Well, actually, I have my black shirt on, and that's how I take my shower. This shirt does not leave me, and because I'm really strong and I get really hot, my shirt instantly gets dried. No, just kidding. What's your opinion on IG trading broker? You have to do more research on that. I don't use it myself. If anyone has opinion on that, feel free to share that on live chat. What do you think about gaming stocks? I have none of that. I am a big esports kind of guy, and none of these really excite me at the moment. I love watching, and if for whatever reason, if we ever see Steam go public in our lifetime, that I would definitely consider that 100%. But anything besides that, I would more think about the content creators of games instead of these gaming stocks. Thanks for the response. Australia, yeah. I think so too. I think Australia needs to take more responsibility when it comes to extracting value of the battery supply chain. The problem with a lot of the mining that's done over here is that we shipped off I think a lot of the spodumene to Asia to get a process. So we don't extract a lot of value. We extract very small amount of value from the battery supply chain. So I would love to see us do more of that here. And yeah, it is a little bit richly valued, but if you dig a little deeper, there are plenty of opportunities. But that's if you're willing to dig. But there's also other materials as well, right? Like other commodities, like for example, nickel. I don't want to say cobalt, but yeah, cobalt is something that you have to think about as well. Manganese, so on and so forth. You can think about rare earths as well. What's your thoughts on medical? Well, I'm not into medical at the moment, so I can't make too many comments on that. Thoughts on? Don't know about that one. Sorry. Sorry, my screen is jumping because of the comments. So give me a second. I am getting to it. Is GameStop actually going to the moon? I'm just watching from the sidelines. I'm having so much fun just watching the whole GameStop saga. I loved everything about the whole GameStop saga, and I have to say that it probably won't end nicely, but I feel like for the first time the table have turned, and yeah, and they've on the institutional side they felt pain, and that sounds weird, but like I enjoy that. What's your view on Appen? So for me personally, I made a video on Appen, I believe a week ago, and I think with Appen, I'm just not excited about the business model, and yeah, I'm honestly just not that excited about the business model. So when I dug into it, I got bored, so I kind of just stopped because of that. Stocks versus real estate, that's a tough question. If you're I'm assuming you're part, because I'm Asian, my whole life has been like, when eventually you're going to get some real estate. Every dinner yum-cha conversation has been like, real estate will come up at one point. And that's why when I graduated, I just want to avoid real estate because I wanted to do something different compared to everyone else. And I went with stocks. So for me, right now, my focus is in equities and stocks and the markets. I think eventually my vision for myself, especially when it comes to building wealth, is that eventually I'll probably leverage real estate as more of a way to manage my tax positions. But that's something that you probably have to go see an accountant on and so on and so forth. But right now, I am in love with equities at the moment, and I'm going to stick with that. There will be a peak in the lithium sector after enough cells are in the market and recycling process. Recycling is quite far away. Enough cells, that's also quite far away. So it's going to kick in, and manufacturers will want them back. Okay, I think I misunderstood your question. So there will be a peak in the lithium sector after enough cells are in the market. The recycling process of 99% of all materials is going to kick in. Manufacturers want them back. I'll probably need to read that question a little bit more. I'm 100% into Steam. Yes, me too. I don't know in our lifetime whether we'll ever see it, but my goodness, I would love to. I would love to see that. Sorry, my screen is jumping again. Would be great. Oh, sorry, I keep pulling up ThinkHelp's question. It would be great if we get a Tesla Gigafactory. Yeah, probably. I doubt it. Yeah, probably not here. Maybe in Singapore. Thoughts on rising bond yields. Actually made a video on Patreon recently talking about bond yields and inflation. And I think we still have a lot of room to move up in terms of bond yields. But what's really interesting is that there's been an increased interest in Chinese treasuries. So, people have been talking about a bear bond market, and rising bond yields would tend to impact the valuation of growth companies. But the relationship is breaking down. So I will. There is an article that I'll probably put in the comment section after this live stream, and it's from Ray Dalio talking about allocating capital into bonds and how it doesn't make sense. So I have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to knock through some of these questions a bit more. Do you have a horizon looking into the hydrogen economy? No. So similar to my previous live stream, I actually talked about my first video in the renewable energy series was supposed to be on hydrogen. I might actually finish off that video. But yeah, to me, if I compare batteries to hydrogen, maybe hydrogen has a different use case, but I'm more pro batteries. But I might actually finish that video and actually talk about it instead of because people have been asking about hydrogen for a few times. Do I do leverage trading? No, I don't. There's a few more questions. What's your view on CLW? What's CLW again? Sorry, I don't remember. Thoughts on IOU? Do you see much upside from here? Is IOU the buy now pay later for Southeast Asia? I think it is. I think I read the investor presentation yesterday, and it's too early to tell. They need to make some money, actually show some progress before we kind of make some kind of observation. Because when you're making observations with nothing, it's just not very grounded in truth. So for me, I just leave those companies alone because I need to see progress before I become a believer. If you guys have more questions, make sure you leave it in the live chat section. And also, if you have any topics you'd like me to cover in the next week's live stream, let me know as well. And in next week's live stream, I wanted to cover my journey towards moving from corporate and consulting into digital and kind of how I became a growth lead, because quite a few people are interested in that transition journey. So I want to make sure I cover that. And Otto will definitely make an appearance today. I'm so sorry because last week's live stream, so many messages on people saying, hey, I came here to watch Otto, not you. And I'm like, okay, okay, cool. Thoughts on Telstra? Well, last time I read about Telstra, they were splitting into 3. So I'm going to wait and hear more about that before I make any more observations on that. So I've got 2 more minutes. What do you think about travel stocks? I've been looking into travel stocks ever since the whole rotation into cyclical. But for me, when I think about travel stocks, I don't actually think about Webjet and Flight Centre, because if you watch my first Webjet and Flight Centre video, I actually talk about how their biggest competitor is not each other. It's Google, because when you search for airline tickets and destinations, Google is basically eating some of that market share away, right? I actually, when it comes to travel stocks, I think more about TripAdvisor. I think more about Eventbrite. Those are a lot more scalable, defendable companies that I'm personally really interested in. Everything else is kind of like, yeah, that's a no-go for me. ACDC, I think that's an ETF, right? I don't. When it comes to ETF, I generally like to look what's inside, and I remember. Yeah, I don't remember what's inside anymore, but something turned me off about that, so that was no-go for me. Got here late. Can you recap your answer on CBA? So my answer on CBA is I thought the Kalana position, the equity stake in Kalana was essentially the buy now, pay later play. I didn't really expect them to kind of go into the market themselves. And ultimately, the short answer is I think of course they have a chance in Australia. They're like the biggest bank here, right? But I don't think, I wonder whether, international would be part of that market. But, if we're talking about international competition, I think that Afterpay will run laps on CBA, like for sure, not a problem. Just because, it's a big, CBA is a massive organization, like startup. Afterpay is almost like still a startup, right? So I think, when it comes to Australia, they definitely have a chance. I would love to see what they are doing, and especially what they do to not cannibalize what they're doing with Kalana, because that to me seems like it's basically the same thing. Yeah, so that's kind of my short answer. Yeah, please, I appreciate it if you guys can gently smack that like button. Yes, Jess, auto will come in a second. Have a read about Tesla and World. Yes, I have read that, definitely for sure. But I think recycling is still quite a bit away. What's your thoughts on entering into Novonix at this time? No thoughts. I don't do, I'm not an oracle when it comes to stuff like this. I did my research on Novonix long ago, and I'm comfortable where I'm at the moment. And there isn't too much to talk about, with Novonix at the moment. I think we just need to give them some time to execute, leave them alone, stop this press release kind of stuff, go do some work, and then, yeah, and then show some progress, Okay. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. Because so many of you have really enjoyed this live streams, so I want to make this a weekly thing that we get to hang out. And as usual, Otto will always do the honors, and I'm gonna see you very, very soon.